everyone. This is Katerina Garavito with Rise. For those of you who are Rise members and familiar with Rise, thank you for joining us today. For those of you not as familiar with Rise, we welcome you. Rise stands for Rising Insurance Star Executives, and we are an organization devoted to growing, recognizing, and advancing the best young professional talent in the insurance industry. We were founded in 2016 to showcase the fun, innovative, and emerging aspects of the insurance field through our targeted networking events, interactive social media platforms, and technology-driven development webinars like the one today. Today, we welcome Dale Sherman from Allstate Insurance as our presenter, speaking on some great interviewing insights, specifically how to be a better interviewer and interviewee. Dale is the Vice President of Claims at Allstate Insurance Company and is a veteran trial attorney, counselor, and advisor. And through nearly 2 decades in leadership roles, he's learned a great deal about the interviewing process on both sides of the table. Before I pass it over to Dale, I do want to let everyone on the webinar know that if you have a question, to please just wait until the end of the presentation. And at the very bottom of the screen, there's an option for you to type your questions in, and then we will address as many questions as time will permit. Without further ado, Dale Sherman.
Thank you very much. And when Katerina and Amy and the folks at Rise asked me to discuss a topic I understood and that was interesting, it left me a very short list. So I landed on one, which is interviewing insights. So let's get started and begin discussing things that are very important both to the interviewee and to the interviewer. First off, total candor. Total candor is absolutely needed from both sides. And if both sides are not completely candid about, from the interviewer's point of view, about the role and what the expectations are, and from the interviewee's perspective, what it is that they want and what they can do and what they're capable of doing, if they're not both completely candid, within 6 months, one or both parties will be completely unhappy. So it can seem hard to do. You might think, well, interviewing is kind of like a marketing transaction for both sides. One person's trying to get the best candidate, so they want to sell the position and sell the company. The other person's trying to sell themselves. But I assure you, the more candor there is, the better their outcomes there will be for both sides. Next is be yourself. This is also for both sides, and this is kind of an offshoot of candor. It might seem like simple enough advice, but is not that frequently followed. For the interviewee, if they don't like you personally as you are and as you present being yourself, it's not going to change once you get there. They're not going to suddenly start liking you 6 months later, in all likelihood. And it's better to know right out of the gate if you don't fit in, because if you don't, this is absolutely not the place that you want to work. As your career progresses, you'll find that being good is not enough. You not only have to be good at what you do and well known, but you have to be liked. So if they don't like you as you are right away, learn that and choose someplace else. For the interviewer, especially for the hiring manager, you've also got to be yourself. You need to afford the candidate a reasonable preview of what it would be like to work for you and to work at this company. You need to see if the candidate's a good fit for the role, but the candidate must also be able to assess if you are a good fit for them and if your company is a good fit for them. And if you represent your company or yourself to be something other than it is, they can't assess if they're a good fit or not. So move on to some guidelines for interviewers. First off, don't rush the process. If you make the wrong choice, you're certainly going to be stuck with the wrong employee for far longer than you'd like to be, maybe years at a time even, before that person moves on and you can get them to move on. And the patience necessary to get the right person for the job is always going to be rewarded. So to get that right person in and to make sure the process goes the way that it should, you want to have really easy to understand job descriptions. Corporate speak is not going to do anything here to let prospective employees know what you're truly seeking. Let me give you an example. And this is from a real posting that I saw, and it was for the job description. Integrates high-level strategies across multiple AORs, ensuring key stakeholders are aligned and have a clear line of sight to all KPIs. If you use language like that, very few people are going to understand it. And by the way, do you really want a candidate who reads a phrase like integrates high-level strategies across multiple AORs, ensuring key stakeholders are aligned and have a clear line of sight to all key KPIs, and then says, you know what, that's me. I've always been like that. I can kill it at your shop, finding those clear line of sights to the KPIs. Don't do that. If you use too much corporate speak, eventually it just becomes devoid of meaning. Better to tell candidates exactly what you want in plain English, exactly what you expect in plain English, and then and only then are you the most likely to get the best matches. The resume. If you're the interviewer, consider the resume, but don't be entirely bound by it. Right? Don't follow it too closely. It's a piece of paper that got the person in the door, but now you have the person in front of you and you can find out all about them. That resume is very self-serving, so to speak, for the person who drafted it, because it could have said whatever they wanted it to say in whatever phrasing in language that best reflected on them. So now you can ask questions based on it, but understand that if you stick just to the resume, you're not really going to get a full feel for what the employee or potential employee can be and really is as a person, because they're going to have prepared answers for about everything you ask. So use the resume to guide your questions and understand the candidate's background, but then ask questions that truly inform you what kind of person and what kind of potential employee is sitting across the table from you. You're certainly going to want to inquire about anything unusual, like work history gaps or obvious job hopping. And while those things shouldn't let you rule the person out, you want to get satisfactory answers to those. And really, you want to get satisfactory answers within what's appropriate. You want to get satisfactory answers to whatever questions you have about this person and whether or not they're going to be a good fit. This next one, I don't see done all that often, and I think people can really benefit from that if they're hiring managers. Consider sending written questions in advance. These are really great, and they made a significant difference for me as a hiring manager, and I've seen other managers have great success with it. They allow you as an interviewer to get a feel for the commitment level of the applicant. You can understand their communication skills. You can learn how they think, how they solve problems. You can learn how much they know, and you can also learn how much they're willing to research. You can see if they're organized. You can see if they're willing to meet deadlines, and you can narrow a broad pool of candidates down very quickly by sending out written questions in advance. The half-hearted ones who are just kind of feigning interest and just want whatever job comes their way, they won't even bother responding. It's much better to get them out of your pool because they might look great on a resume, but if they don't have the commitment to answer some written questions, you'll know their heart's not in it, and you won't have to waste your time speaking with them. They won't have to waste their time speaking with you, and you'll get to the dedicated people who truly want the job and have a passion for it. You'll get them in your pool faster, and then you can narrow that pool down to just the best of the best. So now let's focus on the interviewee and some guidance for the interviewee. First off, do your homework and thoroughly prepare. This is the one part that you and only you can control. Your level of preparedness is entirely up to you, and it's what you make out of it. The other factors, the kind of candidate that they're truly seeking, whether they have someone just like you with your set of skills, or whether they want someone with more experience, less experience, different experience, you can't control any of that, but you can control how prepared you're going to be. So come in fully prepared, come in with passion, know exactly what the company does. That shows your level of commitment, that you've done your homework, know the companies they compete against, know your target company and why they have an edge in the marketplace, and be ready to explain what you're going to do to help them maintain that edge. In other words, why hiring you is going to be an addition that's going to significantly improve the team that you're joining. Also, for the interviewee, just like for the interviewer, consider the resume. First off, you're the one presenting it, and this represents your brand, right? So make it flawless. You want to get rid of any typos, any poor grammar, because all those things are going to compromise your chance. I mean, think about it. It's the ultimate self-serving document. If you're truly a prepared person and a details person, you're not going to have any mistakes in it whatsoever. I've seen resumes where there were typos in the name. Yes, I'm saying that correctly. The name. They got their name wrong in their own resume, right? Okay, it's a non-starter. So you want it to be flawless. You want the grammar to be right because you will be judged adversely and maybe not even get the interview at all if you have any kind of typos or mistakes in it. And this one is easily overlooked, especially in these days of being paperless, but bring copies of the resume to the interview. It may seem like an obvious point, and you may say, well, of course I'm going to do that. You'll be amazed how many people don't show up with copies of their own resume. What's the worst thing that can happen if you have them and don't need them, right? You just kind of keep them quietly in your folder. And by the way, I think people only have those certain kinds of leather-bound folders for interviews, but you keep them in there. Better to have them and not need them than need them and not have them. And you want to print them on nice paper, a good linen or heavy bound cotton paper, because this is your brand. It represents your brand, and the piece of paper you hand to them, if they feel it and it feels cheap, that can reflect on your brand. If it feels like, wow, this person really cares about their image, that brings an impression as well. You want to keep everything in there accurate first and foremost. You don't want to overstate anything. You don't want to embellish anything. You want to get the job titles right. You want to keep the description short, because remember, you're not getting the job with this resume. You're getting the interview with this resume. So a one-pager really, no matter how long of experience you have, a one-pager should capture it all. Odds are it's not going to get read anyway. If it's a 2 or 3-pager, it's absolutely not going to get read. And these days, with electronic submissions, mostly you're talking about AI and you're talking about computers scanning these things, looking for keywords. So the keywords and the descriptions are far more important than whatever prose you want to put in there. Leave the prose to the discussion so you can go into a narrative about your skills and about your experience. Leave the descriptions short. They're just to get you in the door. And smart interviewers, like I mentioned before, are not going to base all their questions on what's in the resume, but you do want to have answers for anything that they ask. And if you have things that are red flags for interviewers, and I'm talking about multiple jobs in a short period of time, short stays on those jobs, short stays on any job, a gap in your work history, there might be very compelling reasons for all those things, but be ready in advance to articulate those compelling reasons, because they are going to ask. And don't make up something, right? Have something that really describes why it is that you're away from the workforce, or why it is that you stayed a short period of time at some places. It happens, but if there's lots and lots of short stays, it's going to raise a lot more questions, and you better have answers to those. Want to read the job description carefully. And before I talked about for the interviewer, having very good job descriptions that are easy to understand. So as the interviewee, read that job description, understand what they're asking, right? Do what you can when you're in the interview to ensure that you display or describe an aptitude for as many parts of that role as you reasonably can. You want to be forthright about your experience. If you don't have some experience, that's fine. Own up to it. But share your ideas for how you think you're going to acquire it, or acquire some proxy for that experience. If you're new to the workforce, of course you don't have experience, but you can talk about the skills you have and how you can take those skills and learn quickly. If it's an internal posting, don't be afraid of an expression in there like preferred candidate, right? Suggesting that the interviewer has somebody in mind already. That's okay. They may never have met you, and you might very quickly become their preferred candidate if you impress them enough. Or if they've never met you and you impress them, you might not get this job, but you might be the first name they think of for the next one. Or something I've seen happen many times, you might find that you impress the interviewer enough that she tells a coworker, another hiring manager, hey, I just met this person, and while they weren't the ideal fit for my job because another stronger candidate was there who had better experience and was a better match, I think this person would be great for a number of other roles in the company. Why don't you give them a call and have a discussion with them? So don't let that stop you, preferred candidate, or if it's slightly beyond your experience level or slightly beyond your skill set. If you still have 80 or 90% of what they're seeking and you think it's a good job for you, go ahead and apply. Prepare for questioning. Employers use all kinds of different names for what's sometimes called behavioral description interviewing, or BDI. Know what that is and be ready for it, and know how you're going to answer those questions and what the common types of questions are, and have talk paths for that in your head that you've prepared and maybe shared with somebody else, or certainly shared out loud. People seem to think that it's strange to talk through those things ahead of time, but that kind of practice is the only way that you get smooth for interviews, and that you don't stumble and stutter and stammer when asked questions of the type that BDI presents. BDI is looking for evidence of past behaviors that would be suggestive and predictive of future behaviors. In other words, what have you done in the past that if you encounter the same kind of situation in my company, that you would do the same thing or do a better version of the same thing and have success. The kinds of things that BDI or those kinds of questions ask about usually tend to focus around leadership, working through adversity, customer service. If you know how to respond to those things, and they'll usually ask you, like, tell me about a time when you displayed great customer service. Tell me about a time when a colleague didn't display good customer service and what you did with it. Tell me about a time when you worked through adversity and what was the outcome. Whenever you answer these things, understand what the question behind the question is for all this. One question behind the question is, what have you done in the past that if you repeat it in the future, you're going to have success here? But another question that's out there is this someone who's going to hurt my business? Another question that's in the background is, does this person just want a job or do they want this job specifically? And what separates this candidate from other candidates, especially those with more experience? Will they be a good cultural fit here? That's always a question behind the question too. But when it comes to the BDI type questions, you want to be able to talk about things that you did personally. A lot of candidates fall into this talk path where they say, we did this, we did that, and it becomes a group success. Normally in polite conversation, you don't want to say I all the time, but when you're answering behavioral description interviewing questions, you do want to say I, because the interviewer needs to know what you personally did to move the needle on a project or what you personally did to make a contribution. When they hear we in response to BDI questions versus I, they think, you know what, this wasn't really this person's experience, this was the group's experience, and they're sharing the group success and trying to co-opt that as their own, as if it were their personal success when it wasn't. So you want to talk about things you were personally involved in, where you personally made a contribution and you personally made a difference, so they can know that if you personally apply that same degree of application to the new role, that you'll have success there. So you might be asked at the end, if you have questions for the interviewer, have questions ready and have questions that prove you did your homework and understand the role, right? So ask questions about the business that show that you're astute, that show some insights, that show you have some passion for this industry, and that show you care, and that you really took the time to study and took the time to invest in possibly becoming a member of this company. And by the way, if this is potentially going to be your career, don't you want to do that ahead of time? Don't you want to do all that homework so you know, is this the place that I want to work? You can't just be impressed with one person and say you want to work there. You should know about the entire company. What are other people saying about the company? What's their history been? What does their future look like? You want to know all those things in advance and ask questions based on that. And don't be shy about the questions that you ask. Have some insight, even if they're tough questions, right? Even if they're tough questions like, you had a tough quarter last quarter. Are things looking to improve? Investors were commenting on X, Y, and Z. Is that being turned around? Because you're going to want to know that too if you're not only a future employee, but you'll probably end up being a future investor through 401k programs and things like that. Also ask questions that show that you want to do well. So you might ask, what are the important operational metrics for this job? What am I going to be measured upon, right? How will you know that the person you place in this role is succeeding? Like, what indicators are you going to look at that we're going to determine success? And that's going to be important for you to know if you get the role, because you want to hit the ground running and you want to be successful right out of the gate. Dress the part. So this is the last slide, and there's some general advice here too, but it kind of all falls under dress the part. I mean, you want to show up as the person that the interviewer imagines being in the role. And some of that starts with just how you dress. You never want to be underdressed for the interview. That doesn't necessarily mean always wear a suit. And admittedly, the definition of what you're supposed to wear to an interview is changing, but you certainly want to dress at the top end of the dress code for the business culture that you're joining. So if it's a place where no one has ever worn a suit and no one ever will wear a suit, okay, you don't wear a suit. But you want to sort of get a feel for what people do wear there and dress accordingly at the top end of that range. You're much better off being criticized mentally by somebody for dressing up than for dressing down. If you're overdressed, they may look askance at you and just, is this person trying too hard is kind of the worst thing they might think about you. But that's not going to be fatal to your candidacy. What would be fatal to your candidacy is if you underdressed, right? Because it doesn't show respect for the role. It doesn't show respect for the interviewer. It doesn't show respect for the company that you're potentially joining. And it suggests you have poor judgment. If the worst thing they can say about your judgment is that you overdress for an interview, I think you can be forgiven for that. But if your judgment suggests that you showed up in shorts and flip-flops, that is not the right way to go. You also want to show up as being comfortable, right? So you want to be at ease as much as you can in the interview, but not so much at ease that you show up with Starbucks in your hand, right? I mean, if you're offered coffee or offered water, by all means, take it. But there's something about showing up with drinks or snacks in your hand that make it seem like you're a little too comfortable. So you remember it's a business transaction, and you want to walk in as a professional and give the idea that you're comfortable, but you're not too comfortable, and you're certainly not complacent. The last thing that I talk about is being bright, friendly, and happy. And I'm not thinking about the REM song, Shiny Happy People. I'm just thinking about candidates I've hired over the years, and the mantra I've always had in my head, which is I want to bring in people who are bright, friendly, and happy because I can teach them the rest. In most of the places that I've worked, in most of the places I've been a leader, if you are looking for those traits, just about everything else really can be learned on the job. But if you bring in people who are not that bright, or if you bring in people who are not friendly, and you bring in people who are not happy, that's not going to work out well. If nothing else, right? If nothing else, it's not just about creating an environment where it's pleasant to be around everybody else. People who are bright, friendly, and happy build relationships. They build relationships inside work, and they build relationships outside work. So I'm talking about with vendors, with businesses you interact, so B2B, with customers, B2C, right? They build these relationships, and the importance of building relationships cannot be overstated. It is so important, and it really is a difference maker, because the people who build the relationships make the difference. They're the ones who are productive and effective leaders, and they stand out from the rest of the pack. So if you bring in those people who are bright, friendly, and happy as an interviewer, you'll get the right candidates. And if you show up as an interviewee as being bright, friendly, and happy, then you're much more likely to get the job. And that's certainly, given the same experience, that'll separate you from someone who shows up and is a little bit less passionate, a little bit less outgoing. You'll be more likely to get the job. So in a second here, I'm going to open it up for questions. But I do want to say, if you like what you heard today, I do highly recommend joining RISE. Rising Insurance Star Executives is a great organization that promotes the interests of young insurance professionals. And hopefully we'll be able to get you a link if you want to sign up and join. It is free. Membership is free. But the fact that it's free doesn't mean you don't get a lot of value back. You get tremendous value in return. So please do consider that. It's not just webinars, it's events. It is different conferences around the country that they sponsor directly or sponsor with others. RISE is a fantastic organization. I sit on their board, so I am a little bit biased, but I can tell you firsthand that they're great. So why don't we open it up to questions and see if there are any out there.
Thank you, Dale, so much for that input on RISE. And yes, we will have a link. If I can put it into my chat in a moment for everyone to see, or it already is, www.riseprofessionals.com. And we do have a handful of questions here that I can ask Dale directly that we're getting in, and you still have time to type some and send it over to us. The first question is, how do you respond to a question like, what is your biggest weakness in an interview?
So that one comes up all the time, and I think it's one where people really stumble. It's not one that I ask, but it's one that has been asked of me many times, and maybe because my weaknesses are so obvious. But I do get asked that. I've seen that asked, and I've heard of that being asked. I think the best way to respond to that one is by showcasing a strength that can also be a weakness. And I'll give you an example. Maybe you're someone who gets a lot done. Maybe you are highly productive, and you move fast throughout the day. Well, the strength of someone who moves fast and is highly productive is they knock out a lot of work, right? But their weakness can be they may spend insufficient time on something that requires a little bit more time to be applied to it. So I think it's something where you can show a little bit of candor, you can show a little bit of vulnerability, and you certainly want to show some vulnerability. Nobody wants to interview a candidate and hear that all I've ever done is succeed. It's okay to share some of your failures as long as you learn from them. If they were just some devastating event, that left you depressed, and that's the end of the story, well, that's not much to share. But if instead of devastation, it was motivation, and that failure turns you into a better person and a better employee, and you can show how you learn from it, and show humility in that regard, that is a good story to share. So I'd, in response to a question like that, find a strength and talk about how that strength can sometimes show up as a weakness.
That's actually very good advice. Okay, we have another one here that says, what are ways an interviewee can prepare or do their homework as you suggested for the role?
Right. So, there's really these days nothing that beats Google. Google can tell you lots of stuff about any place that you're looking to interview, but some of the stuff will be real and some of it will be false, right? Some of it will be inaccurate. But just about every company you're going to go has a website themselves, and it is amazing how much you can find out about that company just by studying the website. Their website. Now, remember, this is what they put out there. This is what they wanted you to see. So it's going to have a certain bias in it, and you wouldn't want to take it at face value. Another place to get objective information about the company is often from investment pages. So if you go to Yahoo Finance or something like that, you might be able to read stories, you might be able to read comment boards, chat spaces, you might articles about these different companies and what their challenges are, what their successes have been. Those are good places to study and do some research. And another thing to do is talk to somebody who works there, right? If places like LinkedIn will tell you that you have 1 connection, 7 connections, 5 connections that work at this place, whatever posting you're seeking. So if you truly know that person, I wouldn't contact them if you barely know them. But if you've met them and you actually have a relationship with them, not just a LinkedIn connection, but a relationship, talk to them and find out what's the upside of working there, what's the downside of working there, and would they recommend it as a great place to work.
Thank you, Dale. We have another question that asks, how should we respond to a BDI question that asks about a scenario we've never been in? I haven't been in the workforce very long, but I don't want to just make up an answer or sound inexperienced either.
So and that's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
And for newer workers, it can be hard to come up with professional experience examples for anything that's asked. And what I would do is I would turn to the interviewer and say, I'm recently out of school. I don't have a lot of business experience, but I have very rich life experience. Would you be comfortable if I share a personal example? It's hard for me to imagine that the interviewer wouldn't be, impressed by that and would tell you no. So turn to a personal example. I mean, each of us is a leader in some way, shape, or form in our personal lives. And maybe you're a leader to your family, maybe you're a leader to your parents, maybe you're a leader in a community organization, a religious organization, a business group, a school group, maybe you're a leader to your pet. Whatever it is, you could talk about leadership on a personal level that has nothing to do with work, but it still shows how you're a leader and how that trait that you have could be replicated in a professional setting. So it can be personal, a personal example, but as long as you tie it to how you think it could be replicated in a professional setting and how you're going to make that portable to wherever it is that you go.
Thank you. This question actually brings up a good point because there are lots of interviews actually being conducted virtually. So they ask, in a virtual interview, what's the best background to be displayed during the interview? Should this actually be done at home? Or should you go somewhere in your office or a office?
So yeah, I like that question, and that's definitely a very contemporary question to be asking. Because that's, there's so many interviews that are done by video now. So first and foremost, talk about appearances. You want it to appear professional. So I think you want to find, if it's going to be your home, you want a place with a solid wall behind you. your taste in art might not be theirs. Your taste in bands might not be theirs. Your taste in paints might not be theirs, right? So something with a neutral background that is just plain and not distracting, but probably not just a plain white wall that could look like a hostage video, right? I mean, you want to be careful and make sure that it does look like a warm environment. You want to keep it free from distractions. So if there's, little people in your life who might be making a lot of noise, you want to be separated from them. You want to make sure you don't have dogs barking in the background or doorbells ringing. So if you need to go somewhere like a library, almost every public library will let you sign a room that you can use, and libraries are quiet places. And you also might want to consider, if you're going to be somewhere like a library or even being at home, using a headset with your computer, because you're going to get better audio. You're always going to hear the interviewer, and you won't need to shout, and you'll be able to speak very comfortably. So audio headset is probably a good idea to use.
Thank you. Someone asks here, how do you feel about a handwritten thank you note from the interviewee, or even just a follow-up after the interview?
I think that they're great. And the handwritten is amazing if you can pull that off. The only problem with that is if you're working in the same office with them, you're trying to get a lateral or you're trying to get an internal job, you can probably just drop it off or drop it off with their administrative assistant. But if you're dropping it in the mail, it could take a couple days to get there, and they may have interviewed 12 people, and it may be a little bit late in the game. They may have already made their decision. So nothing wrong with an email interview thank you note. I would be surprised if I didn't get those from maybe half to 3/4 of the interviewees over the years. It's just a good chance to say that you enjoyed the experience. It's a good chance to follow up on anything. If there was a question you wish you'd answered differently, it's also a good opportunity to invite the interviewer to follow up further with you if they want to about any specific area where they want to know more about your background. But just, saying thank you is just good manners. And I think you always show up as a professional when you show good manners. And you certainly, which brings me to something that you're not asking about, but I think we should talk about, which is if you don't get the job, right? How you respond when you don't get the job is important. You don't want to have sour grapes, right? You don't want to come across as angry. You might be personally frustrated or disappointed, but you want to still thank them for their time. You want to thank them for their investment in you and considering you as a candidate. And if they take the time to make a phone call and give you a voice-to-voice or by video a face-to-face rejection, that means that they care enough about you that they appreciate what you did, appreciate what they did too. They gave you a chance. Now that chance didn't work out, but if you end it well, just like when you impress someone who's got a preferred candidate and they recommend you to another person for a different job, the same thing might happen. They might say, you know what, this person's a class act, and it wasn't as easy a decision as I thought. Maybe this would have been the better candidate for the job, or maybe it was closer than I realized. I'm going to call this person first when there's another opportunity. So thank you notes are great, but remember, if you get turned down, show class there too, and show good manners.
Thank you. And we are going to take one last question, and this is actually my favorite question. What is your most memorable interviewing experience, and why was that experience your most memorable?
Wow. Okay. I think it would have to be the time where I was trying to follow the book where I was, so to speak, and go by all the rules, and I was doing mostly behavioral description interviewing type questions, and I got to either the second or the third behavioral description interviewing question, and the candidate looked at me and just said, I don't want to do this, and stood up and left. I'll always remember that, So, I mean, in some ways, it was the right outcome because that candidate clearly did not want to work in a place that asked questions like that, and clearly didn't have the commitment or the willingness to adapt. But I remember that very, very well. They just stood up and left right in the middle. So that's the one I remember the most. I hope you didn't stand up and leave in the middle of this webinar.
Let's hope not either. Well, thank you so much, Dale. I appreciate everything that you did for for this webinar and for everyone that's listening in. I do want to say to everyone on the call to not forget about joining us May 22nd, which is next week at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our next webinar with expert panelists regarding how to actually specialize in insurance. So maybe you're not in the right field that you feel comfortable with, or you're not sure about which field to get into in insurance. This will be a great one for you. So don't forget to log on to that one as well. Thank you again to everyone, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you.